Thank you everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. I am Hilary Rochone. I am the Politics and Press Officer from the British Consulate General in San Francisco. And we manage the Marshall Scholarship for each consulate respectively. Fred over here with the dog does so in LA and manages that committee. So the Marshall Scholarship, if you are not already aware, haven't done your Googling before this panel, is a thank you from the UK government to the American people for the Marshall Plan and the economic recovery that took place after World War II. I do want to take a quick moment to note the death of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, last Friday. The British people are currently in a period of mourning, and as such, you will have seen that we haven't posted anything on social media this week, and we will continue not to do so out of respect. That said, if you don't see us posting the new links to these sessions, that is why. If you go back on our Twitter account, you'll see links to any session at the summit that you might want to attend. And if you can't find what you're looking for, do DM us. We did decide to go ahead with the summit this week, even though we're canceling a lot of other external events because the Duke of Edinburgh did have such a commitment to international collegiality and to advancing oneself and a life of service and working for something bigger than ourselves. And we thought this was an appropriate way to mark his memory. So please just have that in mind as we have these conversations. This session is being recorded, just for your information, which also means it will be available later for anyone you think needs to watch it because it's so awesome. If you have application questions, there will be a session tomorrow that's specifically a Q&A about the application and the interview with a committee chair and a fellowship advisor who can do a much better job answering any of those questions than I can. So with that, I am going to let our panelists introduce themselves, maybe explain how they found the Marshall, why they had chose to apply to be a Marshall, why UK education was appealing to them, and kind of the impact it's had on their work and their lives. Does anyone want to start us off?
That's all the questions, Hilary.
That's a lot of questions.
My name is Devika Ranjan. I am a 2017 Marshall. I've already forgotten the questions, Hilary. I work as a theater maker. I work with ethnographic real stories, primarily with immigrants, asylum seekers, people who migrate. And I create theater out of these real stories. Currently, I am resident director at the Albany Park Theater Project in Chicago. And I'm also on faculty at Georgetown in DC. I graduated from Georgetown, and that was where I heard about the Marshall Scholarship, and that's how I applied. And I had a little bit of a journey on the application. I know that this is our arts panel, so I can get into that a little bit further down the line. But while I was in the UK, I did an MPhil in sociology at Cambridge, and then I did a Master's of Arts in Applied Theatre at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Garrett?
Yeah, my name is Garrett Turner. I am a 2012 Marshall Scholar. Um, I'm from Alabama, went to undergrad in Atlanta at Emory University, where I graduated with a double major in music and creative writing back in 2011. And for my Marshall tenure, I did a 1 year MA in theater and performance at Queen Mary University of London for my first year. And my second year, I did an MA in music theater at also the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. I found out about the Marshall through my smart friends in undergrad. I was like, they're thinking about these things and these scholarships, so maybe I should. And then, particularly in relation to my field of acting, which is what I ended up doing. I moved to New York City after completing my studies in London and started auditioning and started my career. Um, Studying in London ended up being a really great boon just in terms of the structure of Western theater and how large London looms within that structure. So getting to know the culture and sort of the backdrop for all of these classic plays and everything was really invaluable sort of cultural education connected to that career.
Hey, hi, everyone. My name is Doug Spaniol. I'm a bassoonist. When I was an undergrad at the University of Illinois, I was a bassoon performance major. And I really wanted to go to England to study with a particular bassoonist, William Waterhouse, who is legendary in the field, was like the UK's leading bassoon performer, teacher, and also like the world's leading expert on all things bassoon, history, literature, development of the instrument, etc. So I went looking for ways that I could make this possible, and Marshall Scholarship was one of the few programs that would enable me to go study in Manchester. He taught in Manchester at the Royal Northern College of Music, and I was super fortunate to be selected and to be a Marshall Scholar. I went in 1992, so if you do the math, that's almost 30 years ago. I know you're all figuring out how old I am right now. But it was a while ago, but it's still like incredibly impactful, still influences my life and my career. And I'm happy to share examples of the impact it's had on me personally and professionally, even though I am now mid-career.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Yes, so attendees, those are our three panelists. As you can see, we've covered a wealth of different areas in the arts, and I'm sure as we talk more, you'll see their different personal goals through doing those professional things. Please add your questions in the chat and we'll address them as we go. But just to kick us off, I was wondering kind of more for Devika and Garrett and theater in particular, and kind of the work you've done specific to social justice through theater. Why is theater and kind of artistic expression generally a useful avenue to pursue social justice in the way that you do it, in your perspective? Go for it.
I think that theater and politics, arts and politics cannot be separated. You know, the work that I'm interested in and the work that I do is often with people who are not performers per se. They're not, they don't think of themselves as actors or theater people. They're just normal people, and often normal people who have undergone a very difficult or traumatic event. When I was in London, I was mostly working with refugees or people who had been internally displaced and then migrated to London. And we make theater not to, you know, not with the goal of creating a play, but for the sake of the process and the sake of the reflection, the therapeutic aspects, the learning, the community, the sharing that happens when we engage in any sort of creative process that's intended to be for the community. So for me and my work, you know, now I'm working in professional theater. I'm creating shows that are meant to be seen by thousands of people, but the root is always in the community. The root is always in whose stories are being told and who is being engaged by these. And even in theater that's meant to be for larger audiences, I think that those questions are necessary. And the question of why are we doing this performance now? What are we trying to share with the world? And whose stories are we taking care of? Whose stories are we amplifying is core to how I think about making art.
Yeah, amen. Particularly in relation to community. I mean, I think about what Brian Stevenson says, who is the head of the Equal Justice Initiative, particularly in what he says about proximity, and how there can be, say, prisons in your neighborhood or even around the corner. There can be incredible poverty in a city like New York City, where I've been based mostly over the past 5 to 6 years. Uh, literally like on your doorstep or sectioned off a few blocks from you, but just in the way that our lives are set up day by day, we never really confront it or wouldn't even know or don't take time to think of these people impacted by these issues most acutely as like part of our sphere. And in order to, I mean, like the first step, right, in terms of um, engendering a social justice consciousness is like that proximity, is the knowledge of it, is no, and you can't gain that knowledge of it without being close to it. And so theater in particular, as an art form, as opposed to say TV or film, brings you close to the corporeal bodies of the people who are carrying these people's stories. And so in terms of like it potentially being a jump off point for empathy in relation to whatever issue like across the social justice sphere, I think it has incredible potential. It's much harder to escape or distance yourself when you are in a moment with a real person in front of you. And it all has so much to do with then from there, from that event, from the play itself, if you will, how we as theater makers continue to use that work, which has so much to do more to do with just in the one event where the audience comes into a space, if that's how it's happening, but like everything leading up to it and how you're trying to transform the workers themselves on the way to making the work and interacting with the community. And then you might have that event, but then after that, how do you engage the audience? How do you continue to engage the community around whatever story it is? So yeah, but I think there's enormous potential.
Yes, and Garrett, to Garrett's idea of liveness, right, and that like real sense of connection that's forged in theater and in creative work, but also to underline play, and that the work that we do is actually play and bringing play into the lives of others. And that's a real gift through the Marshall to be able to have that time and the trust to play in a world that's often dominated by product and finality. That I got to spend so much time really figuring out what it is that I enjoy about creating theater and what it is, how to bring that joy through the community and through the people who I'm facilitating with. It's one thing to make something, and then it's another thing to play while we do it.
I don't want to exclude Doug from this conversation, especially since we're talking about playing things. So do you have a particular perspective on music in that role, and particularly as a teacher of music and how you're engaging younger people in a different conversation?
Right. I mean, I think big picture, right? We're all human beings, all part of a global community, and we all get a certain amount of time here, right? And we're darn lucky to have that time and to be part of that community. And whatever our field is, I think we all have a responsibility to keep in mind the greater good, right? The Marshall benefited me personally, like greatly, right? Great personal experience, great professional experience. But with that and with so many other things in life, you feel like, wow, I'm fortunate, I'm privileged to a certain extent. I have a responsibility to help others, right? To help provide similar type things. That's one of the reasons why we're all here today, right? Trying to help you all have a similar experience. It's said that music is the most abstract of the arts, right? So it's sometimes harder in music to tell the the specific personal story of a refugee or an immigrant. But nonetheless, we all operate in a field, which means we have composers and performers dead and alive who have their own background and their own stories to tell. And when you choose to play music by a certain composer, you're helping that person, right? You're amplifying that person's voice, right? And spreading their music and their art and helping to tell their personal story. As a teacher, nothing gives me greater pleasure than when I help a young bassoon student get a scholarship to college, right? Very few bassoonists go out and become super wealthy, right? And super successful professionally, right? That it can happen, but it's not expected, right? It's normally not part of the gig. But by gum, a lot of young people can get scholarships to college as bassoonists, right? And so I kind of make it a bit of a mission, at least it's always in the back of my mind, how can I help this person in like really tangible, concrete ways? And I've been fortunate to like help a lot of students who otherwise couldn't afford to go to college, get to college because they're bassoon players. That doesn't make me a saint or anything. That doesn't make me any different than a lot of other teachers, right? I mean, all teachers help their students, so that's why we're teachers. That's what we do. And whatever your field is, I mean, presumably most of us are artists in some way, and we have that sort of notion to decide how we see the world, spread how we see the world, discuss how other people see the world, and spread their voices. But heck, if I were an accountant, hopefully I'd be helping people do their taxes and helping them out, right? Just so happens that I'm a bassoonist, so I try to use bassoon and music to help others in my work.
I think that sounds fantastic. I'm actually going to take what you said about getting people scholarships to study, particularly this scholarship. We have a question in the chat about how arts students can demonstrate their leadership qualities in the Marshall application. And many times that's through individual achievement as evidence of leadership, but that's maybe not the best crutch to fall back on, or is it the best way? What are all of your thoughts on how you showed leadership in your Marshall application, or how other students can do it? Any of them? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I wrote. Is this specifically referring to the leadership essay in the application, or like the quality of leadership generally?
Well, the assessment, yeah, as a, you know, from the committee's perspective of how they're going to choose who a marshal is they look at ambassadorial potential, leadership, and academic merit. So if you, let's say, gotten past the application and you're in the interview and you're discussing how you're a leader or what your leadership qualities are, I mean, maybe this is just my perspective, but I think the achievements that you're listing can be markers of that leadership, but aren't necessarily going to encompass how you're a leader or how you plan to be one, or how that's part of your identity. Maybe you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I think about how theater, music, certainly performing arts are so inherently collaborative. And, you know, when we think about collaboration, leadership is not generally what people imagine, but there's an incredible amount of leadership skills that are developed through this very, very deep collaboration to create something artistic. And I think that that's something that artists can and should describe and play up as a really unique quality that you possess in the incredible work that you do. You know, it's not just that like I was, you know, I played Nora in a doll's house, but it's the idea of how you create a piece of work with an ensemble, I think is really, really evocative of leadership.
Agreed. And I think as an overarching point, it's important not to diminish anything that you have done or any activities that you were involved in. I think which can be sometimes easy for us to do ourselves. and thinking about that one thing we made one time and who would care about that. It's like that matters. Like whatever artistic pursuits you have been involved in up to today, um, are rich within themselves and voluminous in their own ways. And you kind of have to have um, a view to be able to take that view of the things that you've done. I mean, for me, I wrote a play and about Langston Hughes my senior year of undergrad, and we ended up putting it on. And there were things about that that felt like just this ad hoc kind of whatever project, who should care about this little thing I made my senior year when I had an idea and some time. But taking a step back from it, I was like, wait a second, I didn't just write the play, I produced the play. I brought on a director. I basically cast the play. I was my own marketing team and ended up like putting up flyers and collaborating with my brother to make the flyer and then do all this. I was like, wow, I really, particularly now, knowing like how many different jobs, how many different people are paid for all those different jobs, looking back was like, yo, I went in on that. And so sometimes it just takes that kind of perspective about whatever it is that you've done, if it's not a play.
I don't want to put words in Garrett's mouth, but I'm pretty sure that when he was doing all that work, he wasn't thinking, man, I'm going to be applying for Marshall Scholarship and I need some leadership on my application. I better find some stuff there and pad it, right? What was he doing? He was doing what he does, and he was doing it really well, right? No doubt with lots of passion, lots of energy. No doubt he spent a lot of time on a project like that. So that's sort of the thing that I would like to encourage you all when thinking about this is do what you do it as well as you can, right? Whatever you're passionate about, whatever you're interested in, go for it. And if it's not there, right? If there's not a play about Langston Hughes ready for you to put on, write it, right? And make it happen. And when you do that, you inevitably end up being in leadership positions, right? If you're creating a work of art, if you're creating a concert series. I know for me, when I was a student at Illinois, I created a concert series of contemporary music by living composers who were there at the university, sometimes guests from off campus. And I did it because I was really into contemporary music and collaborating with composers. And so, we just cooked up this idea, and I happened to be kind of the lead person on it. I didn't do it alone. It was definitely a collaborative effort, but we created a pretty unique concert series there at the university. And then, a couple years later, it found its way onto my Marshall application.
Amazing. I think that's really helpful for art students to hear, because I don't know that it always feels natural. Of course, being a Marshall is emblematic of this very specific bilateral relationship and this connection with the UK. Do you feel like studying the arts in the UK positively impacted your career in the US? I mean, of course, you don't have it to go back and do it in the US to compare, but how do you feel it went?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. But like, maybe not in the way one might think. I mean, to me, it was the expansion of my personhood, if I may speak grandiosely. Um, it was the exponential international education from going from a brother who grew up in small town Alabama, who really didn't take into account any part of the world except the southeastern United States day by day, to being like not only like, oh, there are other cultures, languages, and countries, but like being able to interface with people from so many, and just like learning day by day. It was like, as artists, we mine material from who we are, from with whom we interact, from everywhere. And so it rearranged my worldview daily. And that was probably the biggest part of it. Along with like, going to the Globe Theater and seeing Shakespeare and learning of like Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, like Tom Stoppard, and all these British folks who are doing their thing, or Irish folks who are like amazing writers and that sort of thing. That was also constitutive to the career, but it was all of these things that I didn't expect, I think, that had more of an impact.
Yeah, I can say I echo everything Garrett has said. I mean, my education there, I mean, just like the bassoon lessons and the study and the music making, right? Like really transformed my bassoon playing to a professional level. The number of personal connections that I've made have lasted a long time, and the professional impact, I can relate a lot of my gigs, a lot of my publications to things that I did in England as a student, right? And I'm still in touch with folks. I still have a lot of professional colleagues in the UK. I've been back many times. The one thing I would say is, like, so I teach at Butler University now, right? So I've been working in higher ed for 20 plus years. And the Marshall in the higher ed biz has a lot of prestige, right? If I'm talking to folks in the liberal arts, right? I mean, philosophy and history and English professors, I often get the, wow, you were a Marshall Scholar, thing. It doesn't always resonate, at least in the music biz, as much as it does in other fields, right? No one hires me for a gig to come play principal bassoon in their orchestra because I was a Marshall Scholar, right? However, if I didn't have that Marshall Scholarship experience, I wouldn't be the bassoonist or the musician that I am today. And there are other reasons why it impacted me and, and helped me get some gigs.
Yeah, I'm going to combo this with a question that was for me in the chat about the theater specifically and how I now do the work in the US. Being in the UK, and I don't know what Garrett's experience is. Maybe Garrett has some other thoughts on this. The UK approaches theater in a very different way than the US does. And this was really fascinating for me. As somebody who comes to theater from research and from social justice, there's an incredible dramaturgical current in the UK that I think is really fascinating in terms of how we think about the context of the work. There's much more physical theater, much more devising, much more leading with the body and leading in collaboration, which I was really excited by. The UK is far less interested in like your living room drama than sort of what the US mainstream theater is. So that was really impactful for me in my education and in my understanding of what theater can be. And then also the concept of applied theater is really rich in the UK, and for a number of great and kind of dodgy reasons, the UK's really nurtured applied theater, and so you get the spectrum of what it means to be making theater in communities, and you get firsthand to witness and develop your own practice based on what you see. So that experience was incredibly valuable to me.
Fantastic, thank you. I think this is actually a really good question for people applying to be a marshal. If the subject area they want to pursue their master's or whatever the case may be, their graduate work in the UK in is not the area of study that they've done in their undergraduate, have they got a shot? Is it realistic? I'll let you guys.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in there. That was my story. At Georgetown, I studied in the School of Foreign Service. I graduated with a degree in culture and politics, emphasis on the politics, and I studied Arabic. So when I applied to the Marshall, I did apply for my second degree to be theater, but in the back of my mind, this was never realistic for me. My thought was like, okay, I'm going to do my MPhil in sociology, and then I'm going to do my PhD, and then I'm going to like become a professor. And I started writing my DPhil application to stay at Cambridge, and it was just so painful to write it. And people around me, and many Marshall people were like, well, why don't you do something that you actually care about instead? And it's an unbelievable opportunity to get to pursue something in the arts virtually risk-free, right? This was not, pursuing theater, studying theater, getting a job in theater was not something I ever thought realistic, even after I got the Marshall, even after I was applying for my second degree. And because of the Marshall, I was able to take that jump and then be able to get a job and develop a career in theater, right? So like, for me, it wasn't even in my radar that I could possibly do professional theater until I was well into the Marshall and I realized that this was an option. And, you know, this, not for the lack of advice, many Marshalls had told me either that how much they had enjoyed doing their second degree in the arts, or that they regretted not doing their second degree in something that they were really passionate about, like film or writing. So the 2 years was a real gift.
Amen. I just want to say retweet, and also, yeah, this question, I think it's a really great question about if arts are an extracurricular passion. That's what they are for everyone who like before you get a job, you know, and get paid to do the arts. So yeah, that goes back to what I was saying about not diminishing. Like all of that extracurricular work you've done is rich within itself. And in taking that view of it, and if that's like what you want to study, then that's a beautiful. In fact, like so much of the Marshall application is like being able to relay a story of how you found your way to a particular point. I think it really gives you a chance to like confront like what is a narrative that I want to tell about myself, and it's an inspiring one, I think, to say I've been studying this thing, but I've been doing this thing extracurricularly, and it has been setting me on fire, and so I want to study that thing in the UK. Like it's it's beautiful. I mean, I was saying, pursuant to what Devika was saying, that I wanted to be a professor on my Marshall application. That's what I wrote. I was like, I'm gonna get a PhD and live in the same place and have a sustained wage and be a respectable person. Maybe that wasn't a straight quote, but and then actually after my first master's, which was built for the artist scholar, it was like 50-50, you know, and I was trying to lean into the scholar thing. I kind of similarly, I was like, actually, the last thing I want to do is write a PhD dissertation. It just feels too formulaic and constrictive, and so I totally changed what I was going to do for my second year, and the MA in music theater was like singing, dancing, acting training, straight up performing for the stage, and the fact that I was able to do that on full scholarship, like, was so freeing. It was like to me, it was like God saying, okay, we have knocked down every obstacle that has been in your way, and here's your chance, and the only thing standing in the way is whether or not I have the courage or gumption to say, actually, that's what I want to do. So thankfully I took that step, and yeah.
I would like to go on the record as saying there's nothing wrong with getting a doctorate and becoming a university professor. But in all seriousness, it is super common, Marshall Scholarship aside, to study one thing as an undergrad and then go study something else as a graduate student. I can't tell you the number of music graduates from Butler that I've helped, encouraged, written letters of recommendation for to go to law school or dentistry school or get an MBA, right? Like, it happens. So I would say if you think you could be admitted to a top graduate program in a field in the US, sure, you can be admitted to a graduate program in the UK. But I'd also like to say, and this kind of piggybacks piggybacks a little bit on what the others were saying is, even if it's not your major, even if it's not the degree, the thing on the piece of paper, if it's a part of who you are, do it, right? I mean, there are a million scientists who are great musicians, right? And a million whatever doctors who are in community theater, right? And there are a million college students, graduate and otherwise in the UK, who are involved in the arts and sports and whatever else their passions are, even though they're studying something else. So yeah, at some point you have to decide what your degree is going to be. Obviously, you can change along the way if you want, right? But you will put something down on your application. But whatever degree you choose, right, I would say follow your passion. And if your passion isn't your degree or your profession, that's okay too. It'll still be a part of your life. It would be a part of your experience in the UK, and it would probably be part of your Marshall application.
I'm gonna try and smush together a couple questions in the chat here about the application, because of just the way it's structured and the way that you do have to apply to be a Marshall. Obviously, it's amazing that once you're there, you feel you have all of this like freedom and space, but obviously in the application, you have to choose a university and a program and make a case for it to a committee. So how did you go about choosing which program, which professor, which university was right for you? How do you propose approaching that?
I'm going to go first and be really quick. I already mentioned there was a teacher in the UK who I wanted to study with, and that was my goal. And I found two programs that would enable it, the Marshall and the Fulbright. And as I said, I was very fortunate to get the Marshall, and everything worked out. So I think mine was very narrow and specific and probably simpler. So I'm going to let my friends tell more about their process.
Mine was a little bit all over the place, right? Like I applied to one school when I won the Marshall and I didn't get in. So then I had to scramble to find another school, which ended up being Cambridge. And you know, a lot of that, I won't lie to you, a lot of that is prestige, right? Like Cambridge is a big name. I was like, I'm going to the UK, I'm gonna get that fancy degree. And that was like really, and you know, I was interested in the program, but like, but that was, those things happen, right? Those like upending rejections and things that don't go as planned. And then in my for my second year, I visited a bunch of schools. Something that's great about the Marshall is the encouragement to visit schools. So I went and saw a number of them, and I felt really strongly that I wanted to be in London, to be in the diversity of London and in the proximity to London's theater scene. And in retrospect, if I had had a third year, I would have gone north to Manchester or to Edinburgh. Just incredible cities.
Yeah, I think just to make the point that it was laborious and difficult at times to find the right, or what I felt like was the right school or schools to apply to. Because I mean, you're mostly searching online, generally, if you're in the States, you know, and you can reach out to current professors or people who just graduated or what have you, which I would encourage you to do. But in the end, it can be difficult to know, particularly if you're in a place where you're not like with 100% clarity, you know, knowing maybe what you want to do career-wise or what have you. But I guess the point is all of that is okay. Like the first program I did at Queen Mary was just a little weird, and not a great fit for me. It was sort of a performance art base. So like Marina Abramovich and the lead of our program invited us to a performance of his where what he did was like get a tattoo on stage, while there was like someone playing with fire and like and I was like, sounds great, y'all have fun. I ended up just like writing a poetry show for my performance lab final project, which maybe wasn't what they wanted me to do. But I mean, the point is, I was able to make the most of it. And then maybe this is also be helpful as a point of clarification. Generally, for the Marshall, what you do is you apply for the Marshall Scholarship first, and if you end up getting it, then you apply to schools and see if you get in. So, for instance, for my second year, obviously I already had the scholarship, but since I changed up what I wanted to do, I ended up auditioning for a couple different programs in the UK. And it was contingent on whether they would let me in, and particularly auditioning can be a different process in terms of like who gets in, because often people are looking to put together a cohort and they're taking a lot of things into consideration. So it's not necessarily commensurate to your talent, in relation to whether or not you get it. But yeah, it was like I ended up auditioning to a couple, and then like you said, you might have to try out a couple more, or what have you. But that's the manner of the process.
Hillary,
I'm
I
on
think you're
mute. There
muted.
had to be one. Okay. That's amazing. So we're actually at the end of our session time, but we can go over a couple minutes. Is there any last advice for aspiring marshals? Any last questions in the chat we can address? Parting thoughts now that we have this great art session specific to the arts applicants.
Yeah, if I can address one super quick. Natalie Garcia asked, what's the application audition process like? The application process is strenuous, rigorous, man. Like, it's a lot of writing, live interviews, and you got to like 100% be prepared for that. The weird thing for us is there is no audition. And there's still a voice in the back of my head that says, Doug, the best gig you ever got, you didn't have to play a note to get it, right? Like as a musician, like, we're so geared up to getting ready for the audition and going and playing, and I'm going to be the best bassoonist there. And for this one, I didn't play a note, which is maybe why I got the gig, but that's what the process was like.
I'll jump in for also a quick parting note, to say that I think that my biggest piece of advice that I would impart is don't front. Don't try to be something you ain't. I mean, on the application, or if and when you get to the interview, I remember out of the 21 questions that I was asked in a 30-minute interview, I answered I don't know to 4 of them. And one of them was, what was the political party of David Cameron? And I was like, thank you and good night. It's over for me. But it wasn't. I think there are things that are thrown your way, and much of the test of the entire process is like your groundedness, your authenticity in yourself. And yes, so I just, I would encourage you to see the beauty and the truth in your own story, and don't feel you need to reach for anything outside of it.
Yeah, and then there are people who come into your life who are not just in your Marshall class, but like, the like Garrett and now meeting Doug, that are just real gems. So there's a lot beyond the academics that I hold really precious from my time.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much to all of our panelists. I'm sure you can see in the chat your contributions are very much appreciated, and by me personally for taking the time to do this panel. Thank you for everyone who's listening. Happy to have you here and interested in applying to the Marshall. If you have more application specific questions, there's a session tomorrow completely dedicated to answering those.